Hello and welcome to this evening's show. Hope you had a Merry Christmas and that the holiday week is treating you well. Last week, I think we had a record number of calls with phone calls in for our show with Santa Claus, a 1-hour show. It had to be a record. I think we counted something like 43 calls that got through. Totally amazing, and really appreciate all those of you who watched and all the children who called and got through to Santa Claus, and we're really sorry about any children that couldn't get through. It was amazing, and I promise you we'll do it again soon, at least next December. After Christmas, for all of us, thoughts turn rapidly to the new year, and hence the subject of tonight's show. Again, I'm going to call it an unusual format, an unusual program, and it's got a rather unusual format. You see, I'm using one of these microphones because we have so many guests this evening, but I thought we had to have a good array of guests to accomplish what we're going to try to do here. This evening, we have a group of people who help us look ahead to 1985 and maybe points beyond, maybe some things that will happen even before the first of the year. Perhaps they'll share a few predictions with us as to what the new year will hold for viewers, and maybe some names we all know. Maybe you can call in with some personal questions a little later on. We'll be taking phone calls. But right now, I would like to introduce some of the people we have with extraordinary paranormal talents, or with metaphysical slants, I guess is what we were talking about earlier, Shalimar. I'd like to introduce John Michael, who is a Native American sand reader. Thank you for joining us tonight, John Michael.
Glad to be here.
Shalimar, who is a a clairvoyant.
Thank you.
And a psychic consultant, I believe.
It's good to be.
John Michael and Shalimar happen to be married. I want to ask about how they met. That'll be the story.
Yes,
We have Vivian Smith, a crystal ball gazer, who has decided to join us here this evening. And thank you for joining us. I think it's really nice. We talked about the drive over from Tempe. It must have been dangerous, but I'm glad you made it. And last but not least, we have Terry Wofford, who's a tarot card reader. And thank you for joining us, Terry.
My pleasure.
I want to, again, point out, we've got a large group here, and I fooled around a couple of different ways of unfolding this program, and I'm going to kind of just let things happen and see how they go. I think it's real important that we have everybody here on the set at once. We have, you may have noticed, can you get a shot of Vivian Smith's got her crystal ball here, and Terry Wofford has managed to push some things aside and make some room for the tarot cards, and we'll talk about what the specific tangible objects here and how they relate to their arts and talents is here in a little while. But I think I want to begin with our only male guest, and someone that makes me feel a little more comfortable in the setting, maybe, and that would be John Michael. John Michael, as I recall from our telephone conversation, Native American sand reading is something that you are very much a part of. You said you were three-quarters Native American.
Right, Ojibwe and Cherokee.
Ojibwe?
Mm-hmm.
Where's that?
Up in Wisconsin. It's of the Chippewa Nation.
Chippewa Nation, okay. At the time I talked to you, I wasn't aware of sand reading, to be totally honest with you. But being on the social circuit in the last week or so, I've talked to a great many people who are aware of sand reading.
Sand reading, what I do the sand reading is the Native American sand reading with Hopi sand from the Hopi Reservation. I was taught this by a part-time medicine man and rattle maker. He says part-time because he does his part and then you have to do your part as far as the healing goes. See, this was about 8 years ago when I really got into this, and I was searching for who I was, where I was going, what had happened up to my life up to that point. It wasn't too thrilling. Disastrous is what it was. And I went up to the reservation, and I walked into a particular shop, and the man behind the counter said, "You're late." I said, "What?" He said, "You're late. You should have been here 2 years ago." And he proceeded to tell me about me. It was a little scary. And I said, "Okay, I'm here. What do I do?" And he took me out and back, and he had a 21-foot circle of sand. And he said, "Walk through it. Play in it. Do whatever you want to do. And when you're finished, you can come out of the circle." So I rolled around and I sat down and I dug holes in it and did everything else. And after I came out, we walked around the 21-foot circle, and he told me everything about my life from day one to that point. And I said, "Is this what I'm supposed to do?" He said, yes. And I said, I'm going to take 21 feet of sand and haul it around with me on a trailer or something. He said, no, you put it in a bowl. So I have a bowl of sand, which I do the sand readings out of.
It's a bowl of sand from that
From
area.
the reservation, right.
Now, when you do sand readings, how do you do a sand reading, basically, briefly? I mean, do you let the sand fall as it will?
No, what we do is it's in the bowl. I ask the person's birth date. I put their birth date in, the complete month, day, and the complete year of like 1980, whatever it is. And we put a cross in, which is either Christ consciousness, the 4 elements, or the 4 directions, whichever the person feels comfortable with. Then they get to draw in the sand. They can draw elaborate pictures if they want, or just doodle in the sand, whatever they want. And when they're finished, there's little symbols in the sand. There might have been a picture of a house that they drew in there, but I saw one part which might have been possibly a snake, or part of a snake. And that will relate to that person, either past life, present life, or possibly in the future. A lot of times a snake will represent wisdom. They're looking for it. They have the knowledge, but they don't know how to turn it into wisdom.
Since that time, have you been able to have some of the same experiences that you first had when you became aware of sand reading? Have you shared experiences like that with other people?
I
who've
have
come
taught
down the
other
road
people to do it,
that were
right.
maybe a little mixed up, or?
Yes, a lot of people that were mixed up.
I think I'm a little mixed up, but you've had been able to do that
Right.
same thing and impart that kind of wisdom.
I have
and
taught
knowledge.
some people how to use that technique.
Shalimar, if I may, I wanted to get back now to the two of you as a group, because one of the reasons I invited you both is that you were married, and I don't mean that as a cop. I mean that to be totally honest. I want you to talk about numerology for a moment. I didn't mention that earlier. I think that's exactly what it sounds like, the study of numbers. Is that a little bit simplistic of a definition?
It's the qualitative value of numbers as opposed to the quantitative value of numbers, and most people take into consideration the addition, subtraction, multiplication aspect of numbers. But the science of numerology originated prior to 480 BC, and it's the study of the quality of each digit of number and the negative and positive polarities of each one.
There's a lot of scientific stuff going on right now with numbers. I recall reading something in a newspaper somewhere about certain numbers turning up in nature more often than others. And so there seems to be now there's scientific communities coming around, which is not a normal thing.
Well, it is a science as opposed to clairvoyance, clairaudience, psychic work, any kind of work of that nature. It's a science in the sense that everything revolves or moves in cycles, predictive cycles, analytical cycles, and taken into consideration the fact that it's affecting nature and people's outlook and people beginning to take it seriously. It's been having to prove itself for centuries. It's become something of a more serious study than it has in the past.
What's life like, the two of you being into unusual fields? I'm not sure television is a very normal field. What's life like together? We made some jokes before about, do you read him like a book, or?
It's a little difficult to say because we've known each other for quite a few years, and we were best friends prior to the time that we were married, so it's a little difficult to read for each other, although I would probably be lying if I didn't say that intuitiveness didn't play a large part in getting along and communicating well.
Yeah. Do you try to be straightforward and honest with her, I imagine?
Always, sure.
I mean, in any relationship,
death
you should
otherwise.
be. Any relationship, you should be. Yeah, you beat to death. Okay, well, you both, did you either of you have an idea that you would be meeting or getting married prior to this happening? Did you have
Do you want to tell that one? Or
You tell, it's cable television.
Good. He was sent to me through a mutual friend of ours for a reading, and I believe sincerely that the eyes are the windows of the soul, and I think I took one look at him and knew that in some fashion we would be associated closely in the future, but I can't honestly tell you I thought it was marriage. I just thought there was a very, very close tie there the first time I saw him.
When I talked to John Michael over the telephone, he told me that you were both a clairvoyant and a channel. Now, what's the difference between those two, or say, a medium, to throw in a third?
Okay. Clairvoyance and being a medium are both aspects of being a channel. You can be a channel. Anybody on this panel here tonight is a channel. They are a recipient of some form of universal or cosmic energy, and they express it in their particular field or whichever way they feel more comfortable in. As far as being a clairvoyant, I'm probably more clairaudient than I am clairvoyant, which means I hear. It's a combination of telepathy and clairvoyance.
Have you always had such talents?
Yes,
Like
since
when you
I
were a
was,
child,
yes,
teenager?
absolutely.
Teenage years seem to be the ones that most people recall, I think, when they began to social interactions and things. That's true with you?
That's very true.
Yeah. I want to also talk how you got started on numerology, if you could, for a moment.
Okay.
If you don't mind. If you don't mind.
No, it just was something that was very fascinating. In fact, John Michael kind of introduced me to it by just doing a little example for me when we did our first session together, our first reading. And it was so fascinating that I'm self-taught. I started to research through several different books and several different sources, and I kind of gleaned from each one of them which one I felt more comfortable with and which one brought more of a satisfactory response with the people that I dealt with. And I began to study and lecture, and I've done some nationally published articles on the subject, and I'm very comfortable with it because although you do use your intuitive aspect in certain respects, it is a science, and it's a tangible, and it's very, very correct.
I imagine it gets a little complicated for those of
Yeah.
us who aren't very good with numbers.
Certainly.
A little later on, we're going to show a contact phone number or an address, I don't remember which we eventually came up with, where people can maybe contact you and find out more about numerology or sand reading. And so that's a little later on. Please hold tight for that. We'll get into phone calls anytime anybody wants to give us a ring. But right now, let's talk for a moment to Vivian Smith. Vivian, thank you for being patient with us. We got talking to John Michael and Shalimar.
That was fun.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into crystal ball gazing.
Well, I've always been psychic. As a child, I had playmates that were from another reality, which I realized was a different reality, but my parents did not. I was quite a trial to them because they really couldn't understand the world I grew up in. The crystal ball is something...
Where was this? What part of the nation was this in?
This was Pennsylvania, close to the Quaker area.
Northeastern Pennsylvania? Or?
Harrisburg, Lebanon.
Okay. And your parents couldn't understand your psychic tone?
They very much disapproved. They thought I maybe was a little crazy. And when I discovered they were really serious about that, I discovered how to keep my mouth shut.
Did you ever come up with something, say at the dinner table or anything that made them step back and say, "Boy, something's really going on here"?
Yes, but instead of a reaction of approval, it was a reaction of very strict disapproval. The work of the devil.
Have you all had similar experiences to that?
Absolutely, you bet.
What about you, Terry?
Yes.
You've all had that kind of sort of feeling odd or a little
Isolated.
Yes,
isolated?
yes.
How did you take those kinds of those early feelings you had and put those into crystal ball gazing? And I want you to talk for a minute about the crystal ball, because you and I got started on a discussion there about the fact that the crystal ball is really, and I couldn't come up with a word, but it is really not something that you look into and you see the images like we do on the old movies about like a television screen or like one of the monitors over there in the studio.
Well, yes, in a way it is, because I do see pictures in there.
You do.
As I said to you earlier, we both know there's no picture in there. The picture is here, and it repeats back to me. This is a form of clairvoyance. A clairvoyant will see the spirit world in sort of the same way. The energies are so stimulated by the psychic influx of other energies that it creates and moves those particular muscles in the brain, for lack of a better word, we'll call them muscles, that would create that image if you were truly seeing it. So that when I look into my crystal ball and see a picture, somebody else might look into the crystal ball and not see a picture. But that doesn't mean the picture isn't there or isn't accurate. But truly, the picture comes from my comprehension of what I see. My vision transforms it on here because it's my point of concentration. It's like, have you ever sat and looked at someone and really you're not seeing them? You're aware of everything that's going on in the room around you, but you're still looking at them and you're not seeing that and you're not seeing that, and yet you're seeing all of it. And this is how psychic information is observed.
I think you're reading me very well. I'm listening to all these people out here, and I'm looking at you, and I don't think I know a word you just said. But at what point did you pick up a crystal ball and say, this is the best way for me to identify these images, or what? Where did the crystal ball enter the picture?
Well, I was already in the psychic field. At the time I entered the psychic field, the only avenue we had was the spiritualist church. And as a spiritualist minister, when I went into the foyer of one of the churches, they had crystal balls for sale. And I picked up the crystal ball and I looked in it, and somebody came up and said, tell me what you see. And I did, and it was right. And several other people walked up and said, well, tell me. And I discovered, well, gee, this is much easier than spreading cards or working with astrology and all that math. And I've always loved things that sparkled. I used to see pictures in the sparkles of the balls on the Christmas tree when I was a child.
You did?
Diamonds will, candle flame, things that sparkle will draw your concentration. At the heart of a flame in the candle, you can see a regular stage with actors on it that portray a whole story. And when you are asking for information for an individual, there it is.
You all were, like, once again, I want to note that everybody was shaking their heads or saying, You've had the similar experiences with shiny objects or with candles or other things, but
Sometimes candles or bowls of water, even anything that will reflect.
It's a focus.
Yeah.
It's a focus
Focal
for your
point.
Okay, Terry, I saw you shaking your head too.
For many, many hours as a child, I would take the tinsel off the Christmas tree when it was metal, not before it was plastic, and I'd straighten it out. I love things that sparkle.
Love things that sparkle. Does it give you a special kind of experience though, rather than I mean?
I get into a meditative state.
You do?
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting. That is very interesting. Could you tell us a little bit, Terry, about tarot cards, what they are, and maybe we'll sometime jump off and tell us how you got involved in tarot cards?
Tarot cards, basically, there are 21 cards that are called the major arcana, and then there are 54 that are the minor arcana that are very similar to playing cards in the suits. And the first 21 particularly, each card is very deep in philosophy, very ancient philosophy. And one of the things that attracted me to the cards was this philosophy. It just fit. It felt right. There are things in the cards that I have believed. It's a universal knowledge, and I just felt very comfortable with them. I am an artist. I'm very visual, and they're visual symbolism. And all my life I've been very intuitive. I've done a lot of crazy things, and I've always been safe. And I put this down I put it down in the past to intuition. In fact, my father used to say I had feminine intuition. It was all right. You know, if you're a woman, you could have feminine intuition.
Right. Never male intuition. I never.
No, that's not allowed.
John Michael has a little with him. But at what point did you pick up tarot cards? Were you now tarot cards? I associate with because of my background, I guess the East, the meditative things from the East. Came about in the late 60s, all those things that we had a raised identity in the late 60s.
The East meaning the Orient?
Yes.
Yes. Actually, I think the oldest, well, they say they go back to Egypt or to Atlantis, so who knows where they originally came from, but the oldest known cards in existence are from 15th century Italy. And my interest in them, I had a reading about 5 years ago, and I was really impressed. And here was all this visual symbolism, and I thought, I've got to find out about this. So I studied it, and not from a book, from a teacher, because this is a thing that even though you can learn how to lay the cards out, you can learn the basic philosophy and what they mean. I may say something that has nothing to do with any of that when I'm doing a reading. It is an intuitive thing. And so what I found with the tarot cards, it was a way for me to channel. I hadn't had a way to focus, perhaps I should say focus these intuitive abilities. And I really didn't realize how much I had and how strong they were until I did that. And I truly believe that everybody has abilities. Everybody has these abilities. Most people will say, that was coincidence, or wasn't that funny, or they'll keep quiet about it. And it's just becoming out of the closet right now.
Yeah.
People are beginning to recognize this.
That triggers me on a subject that I want to get into, and that's the whole thing with the New Age. But I think we're going to have to take a break first. Are we ready? Mm-hmm. I think we would take some time out to hear this commercial message from Tony Curry Buick and from Nevada Bob Sporting Goods. We'll be right back after this. Buick
and Corey, two names that stand for quality. The Corey name has long been associated with quality and service. Since 1929, Corey has been selling and servicing automobiles in Mesa, and they have one of the widest selections of new and used cars and trucks in the valley. So come and see us on Main Street, just 1 block west of Country Club. Wouldn't you really rather have a Corey Buick?
To be the best, you need the best equipment. You need Nevada Bob. Get more of the best and get it for less at Nevada Bob's Golf and Tennis.
1985, which camera are we on? We're back with 1985. It's not 1985 yet, but that is the subject of tonight's show. We've got John Michael, Shalimar, Vivian Smith, and Terry Wofford with us. Terry was talking, I want to get into this New Age thing, but Terry was talking about tarot cards, and maybe we could take this opportunity to kind of focus on a couple of them so the public can see what we're talking about. There are a great many images here on these cards, and you brought some special ones with us.
Yes.
With you.
And as a matter of fact, this relates right into the New Age. Here is one of the cards,
Several cards from that deck that I told you about, a copy of the 15th century deck. This card is strength, and you see how this...
Hold it straight towards that camera there.
Okay.
Just kidding.
How this man is literally beating down the dog or the lion. Can you see it? Okay. He's beating it down with a stick. Now, this is the 15th century way of handling difficult situations, inner fears, problems. You bash the heck out of them. This is a card from a native Indian deck, a very recent deck. And you can see there that she is loving this creature that is so strong. It's a cougar. And she's not afraid of it. She's controlling it and controlling inner fears or whatever you wish it to be with love. You asked me about the Orient.
Mm-hmm. That was where I first, it seems like all the whole Zen Buddhist thing of the late 60s was where I first started to hear about tarot cards.
Yes, this is a card, this is an Oriental design. It's based on the Western Tarot. Again, it's strength. And she is closing the lion's jaws, again, using love, or using what is called ki, or chi energy, which a lot of the martial arts use, Tai Chi uses.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Now, do you use all these various kinds of cards in your work?
I have done. I go into phases. I use this card, this deck or that deck, and having traveled so much around the world, I really do enjoy using the different decks. However, there's one deck that I usually use. The reason for this is the more familiar I am with the deck, the less I have to think about it. The less I have to think intellectually, the more I'm a channel.
Yeah, that was something that you and I were kind of talking about as far as the different images go. You'd mentioned that what a channel does is a channel is able to sort through all the many images that a person like me might see. I might look at one of those cards and see 25 different things on the card.
This is true. Each of those cards has many, many symbols on it. And the symbol that stands out, the one that you pick up, is the one that is being shown to you as information for the individual questioning or for yourself if you're looking for an answer, because you won't look at each card and interpret each symbol on there each time you run that deck, because it would take you years to run one deck if you did.
And it's the same with gazing into the crystal ball. You are sorting through a great many possible messages or a great many possible symbols and images.
Well, it's not exactly sorting through symbols, because the symbol comes up on the crystal ball. It comes up from the energies that are around when someone questions and they are looking for an answer. At the time the question is given, the answer is in the atmosphere, and it will come there in a symbolic way so that I can pick it out and give it to the individual. Many times it's so symbolic that I don't know what it means, that it means something to them. This is done in cases where it's nobody's business except the questioners.
You know, I want to make sure that people feel free to call us. It's a fairly restrictive subject area, talking about the future. We may get a call or two that we can connect with about a very personal subject, and I think that'll be all right. We'll try anything
I
here
would
tonight.
prefer personal questions.
You would prefer a
Yes.
personal question. Okay. Terry Wofford will take personal questions. We may need some time for her to read the cards, and you can get back to your television set after you call us. It'd be perfectly all right if you want to call with personal questions, questions in general. I've got a list of subjects that I was going to ask you about. People like, all the most favorite people, the most famous people in the world, of course, Paul Newman and Jane Fonda and Robert Redford and Michael Jackson and all those kinds of things. But for now, I want to ask if you've had any. Do you guys have any premonitions here so far tonight, or anything come to you about this show? Did you do a sand reading on me or anything, John Michael? I feel like you're looking through me. Anything like that?
I've been very busy working. I started a new job not too long ago, and I have to be up at 4:30 in the morning. So I've been pretty drained over the last couple of weeks.
So you haven't had time to fool around with someone else?
However,
Here it comes.
I had some apprehensions about doing this. Everything we did to trying to get ready tonight was someone putting something in the way constantly. And I figured, well, let's do it anyway and see what
the heck?
happens. Sure.
That's the way I feel. That's the way I feel. What the heck? Let's come over and do it anyway. What about 85? Have you guys had a chance to? Now, I know that's really got to be about the worst question. 1985, as though you can just give me 12 months or 365 days or whatever and say, this is what's going to happen, and, the prime rate will be at, 14% or anything like that. But what about the future? Have you guys, outside of the very personal things you do, have you had anything lately that you would like to share, perhaps, on the future? But rather than my getting into specific areas just yet, the future, 1985, 86, 87, the rest of the millennium, anything there that comes to mind?
I'm into the Native American scene because of my heritage, and again, being in balance with the earth. The earth changes, things that are going on. Some of them are very subtle.
Some of them are very great, though, like the
some are very
freeways.
great.
People want to use, let's say, part of the reservation land around here
Right.
for transportation purposes, and
That is one of my pet peeves. We won't go into that. I mean, they're digging up burial grounds, okay, and that's not too cool
for transportation.
for transportation purposes, even the Moreland
Of course.
corridor. But I guess there has to be progress. So,
Okay. What kinds of things do you see happening to Native Americans? Anything that you might not feel too reluctant to share with
the
us?
Native American has been treated a little better in the last few years. It was also the Native American that put the curse, if you want, onto the presidency. Every 20 years, the person dies in office.
I hadn't heard that one before. I hadn't heard that.
See, I don't remember who it started
I know
with.
that every 20 years, I know that
Right.
phenomenon, but I don't know.
Tecumseh was the one who, and it's interesting that they use him for the not the mascot, but for the ideal at the Naval Academy. Was treated, some of his people were treated badly, and he supposedly put this curse on the presidency at that time. And from that point on, every 20 years, the president would die in office, whether it be a natural death or assassination or whatever.